Уважаемые коллеги, здравствуйте, рада вас приветствовать. Надеюсь, у вас все хорошо. С кем мы еще не виделись в этом году на вебинарах. С Новым годом вас. Подключайтесь, пожалуйста. Давайте мы пока предоставим остальным участникам возможность еще присоединиться. Пока мы всех ждем, позвольте мне пройтись по некоторым техническим моментам сегодняшней нашей встречи. В первую очередь, если у вас будут какие-то проблемы со звуком, либо с картинкой, пожалуйста, напишите нам в чат, для того, чтобы мы могли своевременно помочь решить данный вопрос и не мешать всем остальным участникам слушать презентацию. Второй момент– это то, что у нас вебинар, как и все наши сессии, записывается для того, чтобы предоставить возможность вернуться к материалам, а также предоставить возможность тем, кто сегодня не сможет принять участие, просмотреть вебинар в записи и ознакомиться с материалами. В связи с чем, если вы не хотите, чтобы ваше видео попадало на запись, пожалуйста, отключите свою камеру. Это совершенно нормально. Также следующий момент. Большая просьба выключить во время основной содержательной части, пожалуйста, выключите свои микрофоны. В конце сессии у вас будет возможность задать свои вопросы, либо поделиться своими комментариями отдельно. Поэтому, пожалуйста, сохраните все вопросы и комментарии до конца сессии. И последний технический момент– это то, что сегодня наша сессия будет проходить на английском языке с синхронным переводом на русский. Поэтому для того, чтобы активировать перевод, когда начнется основная содержательная часть, пожалуйста, в нижней части своего экрана выберите функцию перевода и выберите соответствующий канал перевода, то есть с английского на русский. Я думаю, то, что все готовы начать уже вебинар, поэтому позвольте буквально очень кратко вам рассказать относительно контекста, в рамках которого мы с вами сегодня встречаемся. У нас инициатива Дарья Скаффолд. В рамках данной инициативы мы с вами проводим как очные, так и онлайн мероприятия. В свою очередь, Дарья Скаффолд является частью большей инициативы Европейского Союза под названием «Дарья. Диалог и действия для находчивой молодежи Центральной Азии», который реализует Европейский фонд образования в тесном сотрудничестве с национальными органами в Казахстане, Кыргызстане, Таджикистане, Туркменистане, Узбекистане, с органами, отвечающими за образование и развитие наук. В рамках Дарья Скаффолд мы стремимся создать долгосрочное улучшение в качестве профессионального образования. И наша задача– это помочь педагогам использовать компетентностный подход в ежедневной практике и лучше планировать занятия. И мы делаем это посредством инструмента Scaffold, с которым вы прекрасно знакомы. Мы очень рады, что все больше педагогов в регионе применяют его в своей работе. Теперь давайте мы перейдем с вами к серии вебинаров, в рамках которых мы сегодня с вами встретились. Напоминаю, сегодня у нас 4-я сессия из вебинаров серии по профессиональному развитию педагогов. Как вы видите, вы уже прошли большую часть пути. У нас осталось буквально 2 сессии, это 5-я и 6-я. Все анонсы на данные вебинары будут у нас опубликованы в нашем телеграм-канале, а также на нашей мини-странице в Notion. Если у вас не было еще возможности проверить данные ресурсы, сейчас мы разместим ссылки на данные ресурсы в чате. Вот сейчас они у вас доступны, и вы сможете проверить их позже. Также напоминаю то, что и запись сегодняшней сессии, так же, как и материалы, и дополнительный материал, который сегодня будет доступен по итогу презентации, будут доступны для загрузки на данных ресурсах. И теперь позвольте без дальнейших отлаганий передать слово нашему сегодняшнему спикеру Hazel Israel, эксперт Дарья Скаффолд. Hazel, the floor is yours.
Hello, hello. It's so lovely to see you here this morning. Some familiar faces, good to see you. And some people who I haven't personally met before, welcome. It's really good to be with you today. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join this session. Today, we're going to look at something very practical, how you can learn from your own classroom practice through small, manageable inquiries. So, nothing today is about extra paperwork or inspection or pressure or accountability. This is about supporting you as professionals to reflect and improve your own practice for your own satisfaction. Okay. So please feel free to relax and just listen and reflect. When I say this is just for you and your own satisfaction, of course, it's for the better experience of your learners also. If I could have the next slide with the aims on, please, Victoria, that'd be great. So let's start by looking at our aims for today. So today we'll explore how educators can use small-scale inquiries to learn from their own classroom practice. This links directly to the researching stage of the scaffold tool, using reflection and evidence to improve learning. So by the end of this session today, you will understand what a small-scale inquiry is, know some simple steps that you can take to undertake a small-scale inquiry, and to see how scaffold can support your reflection. So before we go further, I'd like you to think about this word research. So if you'd like, type one word in the chat that comes to mind when I say research to you. What does research make you think of? So I'll wait for a couple of seconds for us to see what one word comes to mind when I say research.
We've got
Lovely,
one
yes, studying,
comment.
good.
It's the problem
Problems, yes.
learning
Solving problems.
learning something new. Search.
Nice. Searching, learning something new. Great, yeah. So when teachers hear the word research, analysis, lovely, yes, great. Critical thinking, finding out something new, evaluating, reflecting, yes, lovely. Experiment, great, yes. All important aspects of research. Now, many teachers, when they hear the word, yes, lovely, findings, conclusions, creating new knowledge, and often teachers will associate the word research with universities, journals, and complicated studies. But in reality, most of us already do research every week. For example, you could try a new seating arrangement and notice that behavior improves as a result of you seating your students differently. Another example would be where you could change how you give feedback and see better results, better performance, better achievement by your students. You could swap worksheets for a discussion and notice that engagement rises, that your students are better engaged as a result of this different approach. So all of these different things can be research, trying something new, seeing what happens, and analyzing the results of selecting a particular approach. or trying to answer a particular question. So that's all research, yes. So let's think, at its simplest then, research could be asking, what if you tried something and then you noticed the result? Small scale inquiry is simply doing that, but a little more deliberately, with a little more structure. What if? What happens when? What happens if? Okay, so if we could move on to the next slide, please, Victoria. So does this sound like something that you have tried before? Let me ask you that simple question. Just type yes or no in the chat. Have you ever thought, right, I need to improve something, or I need to change something, and you make that change in your practice, whether it's classroom management, feedback protocols, whatever it is you change, you then look to analyze the result and the impact of that change. Have you tried anything like that before in your practice? Just type yes or no in the chat. And just to say, both yes and no. Great, lovely. Yes and no are completely fine. Some people here will already be reflecting deeply on their practice. Others may be newer to this way of working, and today is for everybody, for people who do this all the time and for people who have never done this before. So hopefully you will find the hints and tips useful and practical and interesting for you. Could we have the next slide, please, Victoria? So why conduct small-scale inquiries then? Let's look at why small-scale inquiries are so powerful. First, small-scale inquiries can help you to build evidence of what works in your context. Not in a textbook, not in a classroom, not in another school, sorry, in your classroom. Okay, so what works for you and your students? That's the first thing. Secondly, small-scale inquiries can strengthen reflection and professional confidence. For example, I once worked with a teacher who felt her questioning wasn't very good. She tracked who answered the questions she posed for 2 weeks, and she realized it was the same 5 pupils every time, always the same 5 students answering. And that small piece of evidence gave her confidence to change her approach, because she wasn't changing her practice in response to a feeling. She had set out to answer the question, who is answering the questions in my classes? And by collecting that evidence, she could use that evidence as the rationale to change her approach. They also encourage creativity and experimentation. So one teacher tried giving students 2 minutes of thinking time before answering questions. She was worried at first that this would waste time, but instead, what she noticed was that the answers improved. The quality and depth of the student responses was significantly better. And that came from those results, that impact came from one small experiment. So finally then, small-scale inquiries are also important because they link directly to competence-based learning. Because when teachers do inquiries, teachers become learners too. So when you think about small-scale inquiries as a part of teacher reflection, which part of this feels easiest for you and hardest for you? I'd like you to type one word in the chat. So which part of this feels easiest and which part of this feels hardest for you to do? So I'll give that a few seconds for some answers in the chat. So what's easy about doing small scale inquiries and what's hard for you about doing small scale inquiries? Does everybody feel quite yes, to get started. That's right. It can feel like extra work. Reflections, great. Yes, that's possibly the easiest thing about it. Yes. 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 Yes, that's true. It can be. Lovely. Thank you for these responses. But of course, the nice thing about small yes, yes, definitely. It can be difficult to gain that objectivity in terms of your own practice. And I think this is where collecting evidence can be so valuable, so helpful, because instead of sort of basing it on a hunch or a feeling that you may have, you're actually collecting hard data on which to base your changes and your planning. The easy thing about small scale inquiries is they are just for you. Although this can lead to a challenge as well, in the sense that it can be helpful in those situations to ask a colleague to come and observe with you, perhaps, or to have a discussion with a colleague so that you're gaining an additional perspective on the data and evidence that you've collected. Or it might be that you would work with a colleague to develop that question, that research question that you're looking to answer. But yes, if you're struggling to get started or to really refine a clear question to address through a small scale inquiry, collaboration is key. Work with your colleagues. Having said that, it's a nice, easy way to start. If you start with a gentle introduction to small scale inquiry to boost your reflection and the efficacy of your reflective practice, how well you can look back and think about whether your planning was successful or not in terms of the impact on your learning. It's a nice, gentle experimentation that you can conduct on your own without telling anybody initially. Get started, have a go. Identify something very simple, make a very small change, and then notice and collect information about the impact of those changes on your learners. Ask them directly. Say, have you noticed anything different? Does it work for you? But lovely, great. Could we have the next slide, please? So slide 5, then how to conduct a small scale inquiry. So we've got some tips here to help to get you started. Now let's bring this closer to your practice then, to your own practice. If you could ask one question about your teaching, what would it be? Think about your own practice. I could give you some examples. Do learners participate more when I use mini whiteboards on the tables? Or does peer feedback improve writing? When students give each other feedback, does it lead to improved attainment? Does greeting students at the door reduce disruption? Do quieter pupils speak more in group work? And notice that none of these are big research projects. These are not huge projects which take years and cost millions of euros. These are simple, honest questions about learning within your classrooms or workshops within your contexts. Good inquiries are not about proving that you're right. They're about finding out. So the very word inquiry is like, we don't know, but we're going to find out. Okay, so you'll notice as well, and so that's asking questions, planning and acting. So choose one new strategy or activity to try. For example, using more open-ended questions without a definite answer, introducing peer feedback protocols. Notice what learners say or do. Ask them how they find these changes, what difference the changes you want to make actually have in terms of their learning. Does it help their learning? Does it make their learning easier? Evidence can be very short. You can take photographs, make short notes. It doesn't have to be a formal survey. It doesn't have to be enormous. And then reflect and share. What changed? What surprised you? What will you do next? This is all about the small scale inquiry, is all about improving practice, making our practice more effective to meet the needs of the learners in front of us. Okay. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So here we're going to connect inquiries to scaffold. So the researching phase of scaffold encourages teachers to use evidence and reflect. And the cards can help structure the thinking. So teaching methods, the assessment methods and the principles, these are not separate from inquiry. They support it. For example, the principles then. The principles learn a voice, the method is discussion, the assessment is observation. So this might lead to the question, do structured discussions increase learner confidence? And in this way, by using that principle and that method and the assessment, the scaffold cards become a thinking tool, not paperwork. So we can use the different methods proposed by the cards to help us to structure and scope inquiries linked to particular questions. So, for example, when we think about the pedagogical principles, we've got reflection in there. We've got collaboration, working with peers, whether that's students collaborating or teachers collaborating. We've got assessment methods directly relevant to small-scale inquiries here with the skills of observation, self-assessment, peer assessment, peer feedback. So another example then that I've got on the slide there is the principle encouraging reflection, and the inquiry question could be, does giving learners time to reflect improve teamwork? Now, they can be very small questions, but questions that you are interested in for the purposes of improving your practice. So I want you to have a think then about which area feels most useful for you now. When we look at that slide and we look at some tools then that we've got available to us when we want to use scaffold, reflection, learner voice, collaboration, observation, self-assessment, or peer review, peer assessment. Which one feels like one that you already use or could very easily get started with? If you could type that in the chat for me, please. Which scaffold method or principle would help most with your inquiry? Are there any that you already use all the time, or is there one that you think feels more manageable for you or more relevant for your practice? Lovely. Yes, brilliant. That peer feedback, that's a very easy one to implement. Or it's quite strict. Well, it can be, although having said that, I do find that peer feedback is more effective when we prepare the students and the pupils to do it effectively. So we give them some knowledge about feedback, give them the skills to provide positive and timely and constructive feedback. Um, so yes, by preparing students to give feedback properly, it becomes more effective. Otherwise, there's always the risk that pupils and students will sit with a friend and say, right, you give me positive feedback, and then I'll give you positive feedback. Or there's somehow the belief that peer feedback is softer. But if we really teach pupils and students to be specific and to provide positive, constructive, actionable feedback, it has a huge difference. In fact, there's lots of research to suggest that feedback is actually the single most important thing in terms of impact on learning. So when we are looking to improve learning, feedback is the most important thing to do. Any other comments or ideas around which of these methods or principles feels most useful for you to get started with, or one that you use regularly? Yes, yes, yes. Lovely. Great. Excellent. Yes, good. Good. See, it doesn't have to be complicated, doesn't have to be very academic and highbrow, it can be very practical. And you thinking about your relationship with your students in your classroom, one small thing. It can be a problem, something that you're struggling with or that your students struggle with, as well as just wanting to build on a strength. If something is particularly good, your students really like to enjoy it, finding ways of increasing that success or positive experience. Okay, lovely, thank you. We could move to the next slide. So an individual reflection task. Now, this is a little bit of work for you to do now, if that's okay. I'd like you to think of one small question you could explore, or one small question you would like to answer in terms of your practice. Write it down for yourself and make it small. Make it specific, and make it something that you think that you could achieve in a 2 week period. So one question that you could answer in a 2 week period. Think about your own practice. Think about your students. Think about their progress. Think of one small question you could explore and write it down. Something small, something specific, something achievable in 2 weeks. And when I say small, I really mean small. Very, very small. Because it's the small gains, it's the small improvements that over time will lead to bigger. So let me give you an example. So we want to think of before, as a teacher, I would do a lot of whole class questioning. I would pose a question to the whole class. People would put their hands up. Let's see who answers, and usually you'll find the more confident, the more able students will be the ones who are always answering. So then if I implement the change of, for example, think, pair, share. So when I pose a question, the students have a minute to think about it. Then they have to share their thoughts and responses with a partner. And then between them, the pair will share their ideas and their responses. Or, For example, whereas before I would always provide feedback in a written format on student work, I could change feedback to voice notes. So at the end of assessing or evaluating a piece of student work, I could produce a voice note, and the novelty of that could be more engaging for students, because research finds that students very often won't pay enough attention to the feedback because they're only interested in the mark or the grade. So, when they get their work back, they scramble to look at what the achievement was, very often ignoring the feedback, which is what they need to do to improve. So it's very important. And hopefully that would improve engagement and improve implementation of the feedback. That would be something that I would want to look for in that example. So this is not about changing everything. It's about changing one thing. And if you can try it in one lesson, it's small enough. So how are you doing with your questions? Have you thought of a question that you would like to answer in your practice over the next 2 weeks? Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to come back and share with us how it went, how your small scale inquiry went, but I am interested in what sorts of questions you would like to answer. Love that. Yes, that's a brilliant example. Yes, lovely. Good. Thank you for that. Yeah. Lesia, sorry to interrupt. Brilliant. Lovely. Some lovely examples there. Any more? Lovely. These are fantastic questions to trigger the small scale inquiries. Yes, go on. Sorry, Alessia. Nice. Lovely. That's lovely. Thank you. Thank you for those suggestions. Those are great. And what was really nice is each of those research questions, if you like, would be very easy to find out about within that 2 week period. You would then want to think about the sorts of data you would collect in response to those questions. For example, does peer feedback improve learner attainment? That would mean you would want to be looking for what sorts of feedback was used, how did the learners respond, what sorts of improvements in attainment did you see, and so on. But yes, those are all really nice examples. And the nice thing about small scale inquiries and undertaking research at this scale, if you like, is that it's just for you, really. It's for and your students. So that's great. Lovely. Thank you for those. Thank you for sharing those with us. So yes, an example I had was what happens if I start each lesson with a wonder question? I wonder what would happen if, and then noticing the results. Do the students behave differently? Do they respond differently? Do they ask different types of questions? Okay, great. So then if we could have the next slide, please, Victoria. Lovely, thank you. So to wrap up then, a summary of the key points today are that small-scale inquiries help teachers learn from their own practice. Small-scale inquiries can build curiosity, evidence, and creativity. And scaffold can help you to plan and reflect systematically. Most importantly, research does not have to be big or complicated. Small steps done thoughtfully can create real professional growth. So in one word now, how do you feel about trying your own small scale inquiry? So we've had some time to think about it. We've thought about some ways to get started. We've thought about some questions that we would like to answer in our own practice. How do you feel now about trying your own small scale inquiry? Some people may feel curious. Some may feel cautious. Some may feel hopeful. Some may feel relieved. All of these are completely normal. Nice, nice. How to improve student engagement. That's brilliant. So then you start with a question. That's what you'd like to find out. And then you would try something differently. You could ask learners for their suggestions. You could have do some research, ask colleagues what they do. But then you try that new thing and you really analyze the impact and the results of it, whether that's through observation, asking questions of students, analysing their sort of outputs or results. But yes, those are great questions. So excellent, excellent. And it can happen in very small steps, in very small, manageable ways. But I hope that I've given you some sense of how scaffold can help you to support inquiry when we look at the principles and the methods. Thank you for your time today. And I hope you leave the session today with one small idea that you would like to try, one small question that you would like to answer, one small improvement that you would like to achieve. But I wish you every success with your inquiries. Do you have any questions or any experiences that you would like to share? Has anybody ever tried sort of research like this? Lovely. That's great. Remember, begin initially with something small, something really achievable that you can sort of make work in 2 weeks. Any questions? Okay, what I've got for you, what I've prepared for you to take away from to, oh, sorry, go on, Alessia. Well, I think it would depend on what activity you're looking to do in that laboratory. But I think, as somebody's mentioned this morning, it's good practice. It's a good idea to discuss what we would call success criteria with learners. So learners are very clear about what it is we want them to achieve through that activity, whether it's knowledge, skills, understanding, attitudes. When we're very clear about what it is we want to achieve, we can work with students around what that success or achievement looks like so that learners are very clear what they're aiming for. So I think developing success criteria with learners, so then it becomes learner led more so. Peer feedback is more effective because that success is clearly defined. Students know what success looks like in that instance. But many of the methods, as I mentioned in previous slides, will be really useful as a part of a small scale inquiry. When we look at the assessment methods, um, that sort of observation, questions for learning, those are all going to be critical tools for us when we have implemented something new and we want to analyze and evaluate the impact of those changes. Then we can use those scaffold assessment methods. They've been selected specifically because of their relevance, appropriateness, and the value that they can add to competence-based learning, competence-focused learning. Alessia. Yes. Yes, I would say so. I mean, in many respects, the laboratory learning teaching method reflects a small scale inquiry, albeit for the students. So that's exactly what the students are doing, is they're sort of they're proposing an idea or asking a question, and then they're undertaking some activity to prove or disprove that, but certainly they're conducting activity to answer that question. So laboratory learning is like a small scale inquiry. Any other questions or comments? Okay, great, lovely, thank you. So what we've prepared for you today as well is a handout. Um, are you able to share it in Russian, Victoria, and I can go through it? Do you have it there? Sorry to be a pain. I'm not sure if you have it there handy. I've got the English one. So we've prepared a handout for you to download and save, which sort of is a summary of all the information that we've covered today. So it provides information around what is a small-scale inquiry. So a small-scale inquiry is a simple investigation teachers carry out in their own classrooms to improve learning. Because ultimately, we talk about wanting to improve our practice, to make our practice more effective, but ultimately, the purpose of our practice is to improve learning and attainment, and achievement with our students. So when we talk about improving teaching, the ultimate goal is to improve the learning. So a small scale inquiry then can involve asking one focused question, trying something new, and reflecting on what happens as a result, keeping it very simple. So why would we do it then? We would undertake small scale inquiries to understand what works in our teaching, what's effective, to reflect and improve continuously, ongoing, to carry on learning about our practice. I think one of the things I enjoy most of all about being an educator is what I learn through that process. And when I was teaching in a classroom in a college, I used to love how each year with new classes, maybe a new syllabus, would refresh my practice. So it keeps it fresh. I would be always learning about my practice, my skills, about my learners, about my subject. So that would really, so in terms of that reflection and continuous improvement, it would always be about keeping my practice fresh and relevant to learners. So also small scale inquiries can build curiosity and professional confidence. When we look for that evidence, we can speak more confidently about what works for our learners because we can evidence it. But also, when I talk about being a learner, we can model lifelong learning for our students. We are always learning. We have phrases in English, the different approaches to teaching, where you can be the sage on the stage, the person who knows everything and can answer all the questions. Or, and this is very much the model we like to work with in competence-based learning, is the guide on the side. So there's limited value in being the sage on the stage and telling students all about what effective competences look like. Whereas it's much more important for us as educators seeking to develop these key competences to be that guide on the side, to observe and ask questions when students are undertaking activity. Because competencies are action-based. There's stuff that students are doing. So we need to let them do it and practice, and then we can just observe and ask questions. So yes, in the chat as well. Yes, lovely. Great. Yes, really good examples. Thank you, Azra. Brilliant. Yes, so the simple inquiry circle then is when we ask a question, we try something new, We observe the results, we reflect on the results, we can share those results with a colleague. So I've broken this down on the handout for you into a table where we've got the steps. So we ask what to do. We choose one small focused question. An example could be, how can I make learners more curious? How can I make peer feedback more effective? Then we try to change one thing, one small thing in our teaching. The example here would be add one open question to each lesson. Observe to watch what happens. The example here could be that learners talk more and ask new questions. Then it's reflect, think about what's been learned, think about what changed. And the observation here is that open questions increased engagement. It boosted critical thinking. And share, tell colleagues what you found. So it works best with group work. So simple evidence, you can collect things like notes or reflections after lessons, learner comments or exit slips, asking them on the way out. Have you seen that in airports and supermarkets? Very often you'll have like 3 buttons, a smiley face, a neutral face, and an unhappy face. How did that go? It can be as simple as that. It can be that easy, that sort of exit pulse survey or exit slip. Photographs of learners' work, anything that's manageable for you, doesn't have to create enormous amounts of work for you. Peer or self-assessment feedback. So there are some examples of simple evidence that you can collect. So how can we use scaffold then to support reflection? Link your inquiry to one or more scaffold cards. So we're highlighting here the pedagogical principles of reflection, curiosity, collaboration. We're highlighting the teaching methods of inquiry-based learning and problem solving, and observation and peer feedback for assessment methods. So when you think about planning small-scale inquiries, a question that could help could be, what question about my teaching could help me understand learning more deeply? Write that one question with us to try one small action, reflect on what happened, and share it with a colleague. But remember, research doesn't have to be big. Small steps done thoughtfully can create big professional growth. So we hope that this summary and this handout here will be a nice, handy, easy, and quick reference for you. So if you're thinking about trying something over the next 2 weeks, we really hope you do, as a way of increasingly integrating the use of scaffold into all different aspects of your teaching and professional learning. So yes, thank you. Any other questions or comments before we finish? That's a nice cheery thank you there, look. Any other questions or comments? It can do, because it can break down different phases of more complicated activity. So it can definitely help more complex. I'm suggesting starting small, starting simple, but you can certainly blend different cards together to build more complex inquiries, yes. Was there another question in the chat then? Lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your time and engagement. It's great to see you here. And there are only 2 left now, so we're very much looking forward to seeing you in the 5th and 6th webinar. We really hope that you can make it. Thank you. Thank you for your contributions also. We appreciate that it can be tricky to participate and contribute in this sort of environment where people don't know each other and the cameras are off sometimes, So thank you for your contributions. Thanks. It's really good to see you.
Уважаемые участники, хотелось бы поблагодарить Хейзел, да, поблагодарить также Алисию за помощь с переводом. Также большая благодарность вам за то, что выделили время и присоединились к сегодняшнему вебинару. Позвольте еще раз напомнить, да, материалы сегодняшнего вебинара, также как раздаточные, да, дополнительный материал, основная презентация и запись сегодняшнего вебинара, они у нас будут доступны по ссылке на нашем мини-сайте. И анонс о том, что материалы доступны, будут размещены в нашей группе в Telegram. Поэтому, пожалуйста, оставайтесь на связи. А если у вас дополнительно появятся вопросы, комментарии относительно вебинара, может быть, вы попробуете шаблон, да, и проведете свое малое исследование, пожалуйста, поделитесь с нами результатами. Наша команда будет очень рада, если вы это сделаете. Мы, возможно, сможем также что-то в дальнейшем, ваши результаты где-то публиковать, для того, чтобы поделиться со всеми коллегами. Спасибо всем большое за участие. Да, еще раз, и желаем всем доброго вечера. Увидимся с вами на дальнейших вебинарах. Спасибо большое.